What did you just say?
Betty was explaining the symbolism in a contemporary Korean ink painting to Manhattan's wealthiest art collectors when her husband, whose existence she'd hidden for 6 months, materialized behind the drunk real estate developer currently calling her baby, and said in a voice that made the entire gallery fall silent, "What did you say to my wife?" Welcome to a world of forbidden romance and dangerously possessive men. If you love stories about secret marriages, protective bosses, and the kind of intense love that breaks all the rules, hit that subscribe button right now. Give us a like if you're ready for this wild ride, and drop a comment telling us what you're doing at this moment and what city you're in. Are you reading at work? Late at night in bed? We want to know where our romance lovers are. Betty had mastered the art of graceful deflection. In the rarefied world of Manhattan's contemporary art scene, it was essential armor. As senior curator at the prestigious Zenith Gallery in Chelsea, she'd learned that wealthy collectors often confused appreciation for art with entitlement to the curator. Tonight's exhibition opening, a showcase of emerging Korean-American artists, was running flawlessly, which meant something would inevitably go sideways. She moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her black silk dress professional yet elegant, her dark hair swept into a low chignon. The gallery hummed with the perfect energy. Champagne flowing, conversations animated but not loud, the art commanding attention. 200 guests, including half of New York's art elite and several prominent Korean business leaders. Everything she'd worked toward for 6 months. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. A simple text. "I'm here." Betty's pulse quickened, though her expression remained serene. She scanned the room, noting the additional security personnel stationed near the VIP section. More than usual. All Korean men in dark suits, their stance unmistakably professional. He'd sent extra protection, even though she'd told him it wasn't necessary. "Betty, darling." She turned to find Gary Peterson approaching, martini in hand, cologne aggressive enough to announce him 3 feet away. The real estate developer had been circling her for months, immune to every polite rejection she'd deployed. "Mr. Peterson." She kept her voice professionally warm but distant. "I'm glad you could make it. The Kim piece you inquired about is in the east corner. I'm more interested in private viewings." He stepped closer, his hand finding her elbow. "Maybe we could discuss it over dinner? Just the 2 of us." Betty extracted her arm smoothly, muscle memory from too many similar encounters. "I don't mix personal with professional, Mr. Peterson, but I'm happy to schedule a consultation during business hours." Playing hard to get. His smile had an edge now, alcohol making him bolder. "Come on, baby. 1 drink after this wraps up. You've been turning me down for months." "I'm not playing anything." She stepped back, scanning for an escape route. "And I'm not your baby. I'm a professional doing her job." His hand landed on her lower back, possessive and unwelcome. "Don't be like that, sweetheart. I could be a very valuable client. Very generous to curators who are friendly." The temperature in the gallery seemed to drop 10 degrees. Betty felt it before she saw anything, that shift in atmospheric pressure that preceded a storm. The security personnel straightened almost imperceptibly. Conversations near them faltered. She knew what was coming, and her stomach twisted with dread and something else. Something she refused to name as relief. "Remove your hand." The voice came from behind Gary, low and textured with an accent that made English sound like a threat. Gary turned, irritation flashing across his face, then freezing as he registered what he was seeing. Kong Min stood 3 feet away, and Betty's traitorous heart lurched at the sight of him. He was taller than Gary by 4 inches, his frame broader despite the perfect cut of his black suit. His hair was styled back severely, emphasizing the sharp planes of his face and the thin scar through his left eyebrow. But it was the tattoo that drew attention, barbed wire ink visible above his collar, curling up his neck in a design that marked him unmistakably as Korean mob hierarchy. "I'm just talking to the lady," Gary said, trying for dismissive but landing on nervous. He still hadn't removed his hand from Betty's back. Kong Min's eyes, dark, cold, absolutely focused, moved from Gary's face to where his hand rested on Betty. Something dangerous flickered in that gaze. "That's not a lady." His voice remained quiet, but it carried. Conversations around them had stopped entirely. "That's my wife." The words detonated in the sudden silence. Gary's hand jerked away from Betty as if she'd caught fire. "I didn't. I had no idea she was married." "What did you say?" Kong Min took a step forward, and Gary took two back. Before that, what did you call her? Betty found her voice, though it came out strained. Kong Min, not here. His hand came up, not touching her but close enough that she felt the heat of his palm near her face. A gesture that said wait without words. His focus never left Gary. You called her baby. It wasn't a question. You put your hands on her. On my wife. I apologize, I didn't know. Gary was backing toward the exit now, his face flushed red. You shouldn't need to know she's married to keep your hands to yourself. Kong Min's English was perfect, his sole accent slight but present. He moved forward with predatory grace. But since you need the lesson, she is mine. She wears my ring, bears my name, shares my bed. And you touched her. Kong Min. Betty's voice cracked through the moment. Every single person in the gallery was watching now. Her career, her carefully constructed professional reputation, crumbling in real time. Please. He finally looked at her, and his expression softened fractionally. We're leaving. The exhibition is over. For you. His hand settled on her waist, proprietary and immovable. My men will ensure your guests are well taken care of. But you're coming with me. Now. Betty caught sight of her assistant director's shocked face, of the gallery owner's confused expression, of the whispers already spreading like wildfire through the crowd. 6 months. 6 months of keeping their marriage secret, of maintaining separation between her professional world and his dangerous one. Destroyed in 30 seconds. 2 of Kong Min's security team materialized at his sides. Peter and Jeremiah, men she'd met exactly twice in 6 months of marriage. Peter, the older one with graying temples, spoke quietly into his phone in Korean. Jeremiah positioned himself between them and the gawking crowd. Gary had disappeared entirely, probably out the back exit. Smart man. Mrs. Kong. The gallery owner, Margaret, approached cautiously, her eyes darting between Betty and the obvious security presence. Is everything? Should I be concerned? Betty opened her mouth, but Kong Min answered first. There's no concern for the gallery. My wife has a personal emergency. Your event will continue without issue. He nodded to Peter, who immediately pulled out a phone. My people will coordinate with your staff. The evening will be successful. I can speak for myself, Betty said tightly, but Margaret was already nodding, relief evident. Of course she was relieved. Kong Min's family had donated significantly to the gallery's acquisition fund. No one questioned the Kong family in New York's Korean business community. Except most people thought they were legitimate businessmen. Betty will handle everything, Margaret said quickly. Take care of whatever you need to. The dismissal stung worse than the exposure. Betty had worked at Zenith for 4 years, had curated 8 major exhibitions, had built relationships with artists and collectors across 2 continents. And in one moment she'd become Mrs. Kong with a personal emergency. Kong Min's hand pressed more firmly against her waist, steering her toward the gallery entrance. She could feel eyes tracking their movement, could hear the whispers crescendoing behind them. That's Kong Min. I heard his family controls half of Flushing. She married him? Does she know what he? Betty's cheeks burned. This was exactly what she'd feared, exactly why they'd agreed to keep the marriage private. Her world and his world didn't mix. Couldn't mix. The November air hit her like a slap as they exited onto 24th Street. A black Mercedes sedan idled at the curb, illegally parked but unbothered by the traffic cop half a block away. More Korean men in suits flanked the vehicle. Get in. Kong Min opened the rear door. You can't just. Betty. He said her name like a command and a plea simultaneously. Please. Get in the car. Something in his voice made her comply, sliding into the leather interior before she could reconsider. He followed immediately, the door closing with an expensive thunk that sealed them into sudden privacy. The soundproofing was so complete that the city noise vanished entirely. The driver pulled smoothly into traffic. Peter took the front passenger seat. Jeremiah followed in a second vehicle. Betty could see through the rear window. Silence filled the space between them, thick and suffocating. Betty stared straight ahead, her hands clenched in her lap. She could feel him watching her, that intense focus she'd fallen for a year ago and had been drowning in ever since. You're angry, he said finally. The laugh that escaped her was sharp and bitter. Angry? You just exposed our marriage to everyone I work with. Everyone in my professional circle. Do you have any idea what you've done? I protected what's mine. I'm not a possession. You are my wife. His voice remained maddeningly calm. That man put his hands on you. Called you baby. What did you expect me to do? Not announce our marriage to 200 art world professionals. She turned to face him now, finding his expression frustratingly controlled. We had an agreement, Kongmin, separate lives. My career, your business. No overlap. That agreement just ended. You don't get to make that decision unilaterally. His jaw tightened, the only sign she was getting through his composure. He touched you. Gary's an idiot, but he's harmless. I was handling it. He called you baby. Each word came out separately, weighted with something dangerous. He thought he could touch you, claim you, like you were available. Like you weren't already mine. I'm not. Betty stopped, pressing her fingers to her temples. This was the circular argument they'd been having for 6 months. The fundamental disconnect between his worldview and hers. You're so obsessed with possession that you can't see you just destroyed the boundaries we set up to protect both of us. Those boundaries were killing us. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. 6 months, Betty. 6 months of seeing my wife only in secret. Of you removing your ring before work. Of pretending we're not married when anyone asks. It was never going to last. It was lasting fine until you decided to throw a territorial tantrum in the middle of my exhibition. Fine. His control cracked, voice rising for the first time. You think it's been fine? Watching you leave my bed every morning to go back to your apartment? Seeing you at events and not being able to stand next to you? Having my own wife introduce herself with her maiden name? That was the deal we made. I'm changing the deal. Betty stared at him, fury and something else warring in her chest. You can't just change the deal because you don't like it anymore. I just did. He leaned back against the leather seat, and for the first time she saw exhaustion in the set of his shoulders. I'm done hiding you. Done pretending. That man tonight, he's not the first. He won't be the last. Not as long as the world doesn't know you're taken. Taken, she repeated flatly. Like I'm territory. His eyes met hers, dark and unreadable. Like you're precious. Like you're mine to protect. Yes. The Mercedes turned onto FDR Drive, heading uptown. Toward his penthouse. Not toward her apartment in the village. Where are we going? Home. My home is. With me. No room for argument in his tone. It always was. We're done pretending otherwise. Betty's phone buzzed incessantly in her clutch. Text after text, probably from colleagues, artists, Margaret, everyone wanting to know what just happened. She ignored it, staring out the window as Manhattan blurred past in streaks of light and shadow. You can't just kidnap me because you're having feelings, she said finally, her voice hollow. I'm not kidnapping you. I'm taking my wife home. He shifted beside her, and she felt the heat of his proximity. And I always have feelings about you. I just stopped pretending I can control them. Control is your entire personality. Not with you. Never with you. The admission hung between them, raw and uncomfortable. Betty closed her eyes, exhaustion creeping in now that the adrenaline was fading. 6 months of living a double life was catching up with her all at once. She'd met Kong Min at a funeral, his father's best friend, a prominent Korean businessman who'd been one of her gallery's biggest patrons. Traditional ceremony at a beautiful Hanok-style building in Queens. She'd gone to pay respects, to represent Zenith Gallery. He'd been standing apart from the mourners, devastating in a black suit, watching everything with those calculating eyes. Their introduction had been in Korean, her carefully practiced condolence phrases making his eyebrows rise in surprise. Most Korean Americans her age had lost the language, but her grandmother had insisted. Don't forget where you come from, she'd said. Even if Betty had been adopted at 3, even if she didn't know her biological family, she was Korean. That mattered. Kong Min had responded in English, his slight accent making her heart do something stupid. They'd talked about art, about tradition, about belonging to 2 worlds and fitting in neither. 3 weeks later, he'd shown up at her gallery, asked her to dinner. She'd said yes despite every logical brain cell screaming warnings about the rumors surrounding his family's import business. 2 months after that, he'd asked her to marry him. She'd known him less than 3 months total. It was insane, reckless, completely unlike her careful, planned life. She'd said yes anyway. They'd married quietly at the same Hanok where they'd met, just his mother and sister as witnesses. City Hall paperwork the next day. He'd wanted a big traditional wedding, wanted to announce her to his entire organization, his extended family, all of New York's Korean community. She'd panicked, asked for time, for privacy. for a chance to keep her professional reputation separate from his dangerous world. He'd agreed, though she'd seen it cost him. Kong Min was a possessive man by nature, territorial, protective to the point of suffocation. Keeping their marriage secret went against every instinct he had. But he'd done it. For her. And she'd been relieved, grateful even, to keep living her normal life. Sleeping at his penthouse 3 nights a week, going back to her apartment the other 4. Attending events separately. Being just Betty, curator, in all professional settings. It had seemed sustainable. Now, watching the city pass by, she realized how much it must have been killing him. The Mercedes pulled into the underground garage of his building on the Upper East Side. 32 floors of luxury condominiums, his penthouse taking up the entire top level. She'd been here dozens of times, but tonight it felt different. Tonight, everyone knew. Kong Min exited first, then extended his hand to help her out. A gentlemanly gesture that felt weighted with significance. She took it, his warm grip steady against her cold fingers. They rode the private elevator in silence. Peter and Jeremiah stayed in the garage with the vehicles. The elevator walls were mirrored, showing her reflection. Dress slightly wrinkled now, makeup still perfect, hair coming loose from its pins. She looked fragile, rattled. Kong Min looked carved from stone. The elevator opened directly into his penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Central Park spreading dark and vast below them, city lights glittering beyond. Modern minimalist furniture mixed with traditional Korean elements. A celadone vase here, a landscape scroll there. Her jacket hung on the coat rack by the door, left from Tuesday night. She'd stayed over Tuesday. Left Wednesday morning at dawn to make an artist meeting. Kissed him goodbye like it was temporary. Everything felt temporary in this arrangement. Maybe that was the problem. Kong Min shrugged off his suit jacket, draping it over a chair. His movements were controlled, deliberate. He loosened his tie, and Betty caught sight of more tattoo ink disappearing beneath his collar. She'd traced those tattoos with her fingers, with her lips, had learned what each one meant in the hierarchy of his organization. "Wine?" he asked, moving toward the kitchen. "Whiskey." His eyebrow rose. She rarely drank hard liquor. But he poured them both glasses of expensive Japanese whiskey neat. Handed her one, then stood by the windows, backlit by the city. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "for embarrassing you, for exposing you. I know it's not what you wanted." Betty took a long sip, letting the burn anchor her. "But you're not sorry for doing it." "No. Honest, at least. I saw him touching you, calling you baby like he had any right, and something broke. I couldn't." He stopped, jaw working. "The only thought in my head was that he needed to know. Everyone needed to know. You're not available. You're not approachable. You're mine. That's caveman logic. Maybe." He turned to face her fully. "But I'm done apologizing for what I am, Betty. I'm done pretending I'm civilized when it comes to you. I'm possessive. I'm territorial. I don't share. And I sure as hell don't stand by watching other men put their hands on my wife. Even if it costs me my career, your career will survive. You're brilliant at what you do. People will talk for a week, maybe 2, then move on. You don't understand how this world works." "No," he agreed. "But I understand how my world works. And in my world, you're now visible. Which means you're a target." The words landed like ice water. Betty set down her glass carefully, fingers suddenly unsteady. "What do you mean a target?" Kong Min drained his whiskey, then poured another. His back was to her, shoulders tight beneath the white dress shirt. "There are people who would use you against me, who would see you as leverage. That's why I wanted to keep you hidden, keep you safe. But you just announced our marriage to half of Manhattan's art world. Because keeping you hidden wasn't working." He turned, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. "The people I'm worried about, they already knew, Betty. Have known for months. Keeping it secret from your colleagues didn't protect you. It just kept you isolated, vulnerable. You said you wanted privacy because of my career. I lied." The admission was flat, unapologetic. "I wanted privacy because I'm selfish. Because having you was enough, and sharing you with the world felt impossible. But then I started getting reports. People watching you, following you from your apartment. Cars that showed up too often near the gallery." Betty's pulse accelerated. "What people? What are you talking about?" "Rival organizations testing boundaries. Seeing if the rumors about Kong Min's wife were true. Tonight forced my hand, but it would have happened soon anyway." He crossed to her, standing close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I needed you visible. under my protection publicly, where everyone knows that touching you means war. You're using me as a message. I'm protecting you the only way I know how." His hand came up, cupping her face with unexpected gentleness. "In my world, secret relationships make you vulnerable. Acknowledged ones make you untouchable." Betty's mind spun, trying to reconcile this new information with everything she thought she understood. "How long have you known about people watching me?" 3 weeks. 3 weeks. She jerked away from his touch. "You knew for 3 weeks and didn't tell me? I increased your security. Had people on you at all times. You were never in danger. That's not the point. You kept information from me that directly affected my safety, because you would have panicked. Made it harder to protect you. Made it harder for you to control me, you mean?" Anger surged hot and bright. "This is exactly why I wanted boundaries, Kong Min. This right here. You making unilateral decisions about my life because you think you know better. I do know better. About this world, about these threats. It's not your decision to make alone." His jaw clenched, that muscle jumping the way it did when he was fighting his temper. "You're right. I should have told you. But I'm not sorry for protecting you in the way I thought best. Even if it meant lying? Even then, the honesty shouldn't have hurt as much as it did." Betty moved to the windows, needing distance, needing air even though they were 32 floors up. The city sprawled below, millions of people living their normal lives. She'd been one of them yesterday. Today she was the mob boss's wife, exposed and vulnerable and apparently under surveillance. "Who's watching me?" she asked quietly. Specifically, she heard him move behind her, felt his presence like heat against her back. "Yakuza mostly. They're expanding territory, testing boundaries. Your existence gives them leverage they didn't have before." "Yakuza, like actual Japanese organized crime." "Yes. And they know about me because? Because I've been territorial enough that people notice. Because I've turned down meetings, changed schedules, reorganized my priorities around keeping you separate. The more I tried to hide you, the more obvious it became that I had something worth hiding." His breath stirred her hair. "Ironic, isn't it?" Betty pressed her forehead against the cold glass. "I don't know how to do this. Be your wife publicly. Navigate your world. I'm an art curator, Kong Min. I know Rothko and Kusama, not territorial disputes and organized crime. You don't have to know those things. You just have to be you." His hands settled on her shoulders, thumbs stroking the tense muscles of her neck. "I'll handle the rest. That's what I'm afraid of. You handling things. Making decisions. Controlling everything. Would you prefer I let you walk around unprotected? Let the Yakuza test whether you're valuable enough to grab." She spun to face him, his hands falling away. "I'd prefer you treat me like a partner instead of a possession. Give me information. Let me make informed choices. Trust me to handle knowing the truth." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the controlled facade. "I trust you, Betty. With everything except your own safety. That I can't risk. You have to, or this doesn't work. It's working now." "No, it's not." She gestured between them. "This is me angry and you defensive. This is the same fight we've been having for 6 months in different variations. You want to possess and protect. I want partnership and autonomy. Neither of us is getting what we need." Silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. Finally, Kong Min moved to the couch, sitting with his elbows on his knees, head in his hands. The gesture was so uncharacteristic, so vulnerable, that Betty's anger faltered. "I don't know how to do this differently," he said, voice muffled. "Protecting people is what I do. It's how I show love, how I prove worth." He looked up at her, and his eyes were raw. "You're the most important thing in my life, Betty. The only purely good thing. The thought of someone hurting you because of me." He couldn't finish. Betty's throat tightened. She'd married this dangerous, complicated, possessive man knowing what he was. Had fallen for him despite, or maybe because of, his intensity. But love and compatibility weren't the same thing. "I don't need you to protect me from everything," she said softly. "I need you to be honest with me. To let me in. To trust that I'm strong enough to handle your world. You're strong enough. That's not the question. Then what is?" His eyes met hers, dark and haunted. "Whether I'm strong enough to risk you." The vulnerability in his voice cracked something open in Betty's chest. She crossed to the couch, sitting beside him, but not touching. The space between them felt vast and intimate simultaneously. "You already risk me," she said. "Every day I'm married to you, I'm at risk. Hiding it didn't change that. You just said so yourself." I know. His hands clenched into fists on his thighs. Logically, I know. But logic and feeling are different things. What are you feeling right now? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. Terrified. Furious. Possessive beyond reason. He turned his head to look at her. And so in love with you it's destroying me from the inside out. Betty's breath caught. They'd said the words before. I love you exchanged in darkness, in passion, in quiet moments. But this felt different. Stripped bare and honest in a way that hurt. I love you too, she whispered. Even when you make me crazy. Even when you're overbearing and controlling and impossible. That's most of the time. I know. She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. But I also know you're loyal. Protective of the people you love. That you honor your word. That underneath everything, you're good, Kong Min. His laugh was bitter. I'm many things, Betty. Good isn't one of them. You are to me. She squeezed his hand. To your mother. Your sister. Your people. You protect them. Provide for them. That's good. I've killed men. The words hung in the air, stark and unavoidable. They'd never discussed this directly before, his hands and what they'd done. Betty had known, of course. Had suspected. But hearing him say it was different. For what reason? She asked, keeping her voice steady. Betrayal mostly. Threats against family. Once because a man hurt someone under my protection. His eyes searched hers. Does that change things? Knowing for certain. Betty considered, really thought about it. The man beside her had blood on his hands, violence in his history. He ran an organization that operated outside the law, that dealt in things she probably didn't want to know about. But he'd also held her grandmother's hand at her funeral, speaking Korean to comfort the elderly woman in her final days. Had paid for his mother's medical treatments without hesitation. Had been unfailingly gentle with his younger sister, protective without being controlling. With her, he'd been passionate and intense, possessive but never cruel. He'd listened when she talked about art for hours. Had learned artists' names and movements just to understand what she loved. It doesn't change things, she said finally. I married you knowing what you were. Maybe not the specifics, but the reality. I'm not naive, Kong Min. I chose you anyway. Why? The question was raw, almost desperate. You could have anyone. Someone safe, respectable. Why choose this? Because underneath everything you see me. Not just the curator or the polished professional. You see the girl who was adopted and never quite fit anywhere. Who learned Korean to feel connected to something. Who uses art to make sense of a world that doesn't always make sense. She moved closer, their shoulders touching. You see all of me and want me anyway. That's rare. His free hand came up to cup her face, thumb stroking her cheekbone. I don't just want you. I need you. Like breathing. That's intense. I'm an intense person. His slight smile was self-deprecating. You knew that too. I did. She leaned into his touch. But I need you to work with me, not just protect me. Let me be part of decisions. Even the dangerous ones. That goes against every instinct I have. I know. But relationships are compromise, right? You're compromising your need to control everything. I'm compromising my need for complete independence. Is that what we're doing? Compromising. Trying to. She studied his face, the sharp angles, the scar through his eyebrow, the tattoo on his neck that marked him as dangerous. Tonight was a mess, but maybe it needed to happen. Maybe we needed to stop pretending we could keep these separate lives forever. Kong Min pulled her closer, until she was tucked against his side, his arm around her shoulders. She fit there perfectly, had from the first time he'd held her. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about the surveillance. About the threats. You're right, you deserve to know. Thank you. She rested her head against his shoulder. And I'm sorry I've been so resistant to integrating our lives. I was scared of losing myself in your world. You could never lose yourself. You're too strong for that. They sat in silence for a while, the city glittering beyond the windows. Betty felt exhaustion pulling at her, the emotional whiplash of the evening catching up. Her phone had stopped buzzing finally, probably because it died. What happens now? She asked. Practically speaking. Now, Kong Min's hand stroked her arm, soothing. Now you move in here permanently. We stop maintaining your apartment. You wear your ring always. I introduce you properly to my organization, my family. You become publicly and obviously mine. That's a lot of change very fast. We've been married 6 months. This should have happened 6 months ago. Your mother is going to have opinions. My mother will be thrilled. She's been asking when she gets to meet you properly since the wedding. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Linda too. She's excited to have a sister. Betty smiled despite everything. She'd met his mother and sister exactly once, briefly, at the wedding ceremony. I barely speak enough Korean for a proper introduction. Your Korean is beautiful, and they'll love you regardless. His voice held certainty. How could they not? Because I'm American. Because I'm not traditional. Because I pulled you into a secret marriage that probably insulted them. Because you make me happy. That's all that matters to them. Betty wanted to believe him. What about the Yakuza situation? The threats? Tomorrow, I call a meeting with my counsel. We discuss strategy. You'll be there. She pulled back to look at him. Really? You want partnership? That means being part of these discussions. Understanding threats. Making informed decisions. His expression was serious. But Betty, you have to understand, my world is violent. What you see, what you hear, it might change how you think of me. Or it might help me understand you better. Morning came too soon. Pale November light filtering through windows. Betty had forgotten to close the curtains on. She woke in Kong Min's bed. Their bed now, she supposed, wrapped in sheets that smelled like sandalwood and him. The space beside her was empty, but still warm. She found him in the kitchen, dressed in dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Traditional Korean breakfast spread across the counter. Rice, kimchi, various banchan in small dishes. He was plating grilled mackerel when she appeared. You cooked. Her voice was rough with sleep. I cook. He glanced up, and something heated in his expression as he took her in. His shirt from last night hanging loose on her frame, her hair tangled, bare legs. Coffee's ready. Sit. Betty poured herself a cup, added cream, then settled at the counter. The domesticity felt surreal after last night's chaos. You didn't have to do all this. I wanted to. He set a plate in front of her, perfectly arranged. You need to eat. It's going to be a long day. Her stomach churned at the reminder. The meeting with your counsel. At noon. My mother wants us for dinner tonight. Linda's already texted me 3 times this morning about meeting you properly. He sat beside her with his own plate. And your gallery director called my office at 7 a.m. Betty's hand froze halfway to her mouth. Margaret called you? Wanted to ensure you were all right and discuss your employment status. His tone was carefully neutral. I told her you'd call when you were ready. What did she say about my employment? That she understands this is a difficult personal time and the gallery fully supports you taking whatever time you need. He paused. She was very diplomatic, very careful, which meant Margaret was terrified of offending Kong Min. Betty set down her chopsticks, appetite gone. She's going to fire me. She's not going to fire you. You're too valuable. I'm a liability now. The mob boss's wife curating exhibitions? That's not the image Zenith wants. Kong Min's jaw tightened. Then Zenith is short-sighted. Your work speaks for itself. My work gets overshadowed when my husband creates scenes at gallery openings. She immediately regretted the words when his expression shuddered. I'm sorry. That came out wrong. No, you're right. He stood abruptly, carrying his barely touched plate to the sink. I cost you your career. Added it to the list of things I've ruined. Betty followed, catching his arm. Hey, I didn't mean. You did. And you should. He turned, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her chest ache. I was selfish last night, territorial and possessive, and I didn't think about consequences for you. Just about that man touching what's mine. I'm not. I know. You're not a possession. He covered her hand with his. But you are mine, Betty. My wife. My partner. The person I love more than anything. And watching him touch you, call you baby like he had any right. His control cracked. I couldn't think past making sure everyone knew. Everyone understood. You are mine. The possessiveness should have annoyed her. Instead, it sent heat curling through her stomach. You're impossible. I know. He pulled her closer, hands settling on her waist. But I'm your impossible. Unfortunately. But she was smiling, tilting her face up. We're really doing this. No more separate apartments. No more hiding. No more hiding. He kissed her forehead, gentle despite the intensity of his words. You're moving in today. Peter's already coordinating with a moving company for your apartment. You didn't ask. I'm telling. His smile was slight, challenging. Unless you're going to argue? Betty considered, then shook her head. No point. You've decided. I've decided we're done with half measures. But if you really want to keep the apartment, I don't. The admission felt significant. I want to be here. With you. Fully. Something fierce and possessive crossed his features. He kissed her then, deep and claiming, hands tightening on her waist. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. We need to leave in 2 hours, he said roughly. Shower. Get ready. Wear something that says boss's wife, untouchable. I'm not sure I own anything that says that. Then we'll go shopping after the meeting. He stepped back, releasing her reluctantly. But Betty, the council meeting, what you see today, what you hear. I understand. Your world. Your rules. My world, he agreed. But you're part of it now. That means they answer to you too. You're not just my wife. You're, Samonim, boss's wife. That title carries weight. The Korean word felt heavy with responsibility. I don't know how to be that. You'll learn. And I'll be beside you the whole time. He pulled out his phone as it buzzed. Peter's downstairs with your security detail. They'll follow us everywhere from now on. Everywhere. Everywhere. Non-negotiable. He scrolled through messages, frowning. Jeremiah's running background on everyone who was at the gallery last night, making sure no one problematic got close. Betty's unease grew. You think someone did? I think we got lucky last night. You were exposed but surrounded by witnesses, by civilians. That's not when enemies strike. He looked up, eyes dark. They strike when you're vulnerable. Alone. That's why the security. This is really my life now. This is really your life now, he confirmed. Still in. Betty thought about her apartment in the village, small and safe and hers. About gallery openings where she was just a curator. About the careful, controlled life she'd built where everything made sense and nothing was dangerous. Then she thought about the man in front of her, dangerous, complicated, impossibly possessive, who looked at her like she was everything, who cooked her breakfast and called her with pride, who would burn down the world to keep her safe. Still in, she said. But Kong Min, I need one thing from you. Anything. Honesty. Complete honesty. No more protecting me from information. If there are threats, I need to know. If decisions affect us, we make them together. She held his gaze. Can you do that? He was quiet, clearly struggling. Finally, I'll try. It goes against every instinct, but I'll try. That's all I ask. The social club in Flushing looked unassuming from the outside. A modest 2-story building wedged between a Korean barbecue restaurant and a karaoke bar. Inside was a different world. Traditional Korean decor mixed with modern security systems. Cameras in every corner. Men in suits stationed at strategic points. Betty's heels clicked against hardwood as Kong Min guided her through, his hand possessive on her lower back. Eyes tracked their movement. Curious, assessing. She kept her spine straight, chin up, channeling every ounce of professional confidence she'd ever possessed. The conference room on the second floor was all dark wood and leather chairs. 8 men were already seated around the table, ranging from their 30s to 70s. They stood as Kong Min entered, bowing with varying degrees of respect. Gentlemen, Kong Min said in Korean, his tone commanding. My wife, Betty. Betty bowed properly, the greeting her grandmother had drilled into her. Hello. Pleased to meet you. Surprise rippled through the room. They hadn't expected her to speak Korean. An older man at the head of the table, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, studied her with unconcealed interest. Roosevelt Kong, he introduced himself in English. Kong Min's uncle. We've heard much about you. The pause before much was deliberate. Betty met his gaze steadily. I imagine you have. Especially after last night. Last night was dramatic. Roosevelt's tone was neutral, but his eyes were cold. Not typical of my nephew to be so public. It was necessary, Kong Min said flatly, pulling out a chair for Betty before taking his own seat at the table's head. Betty is no longer a secret. That changes things. It changes many things, another man said. Younger, maybe 40, with a scar across his jaw. Makes her visible. Vulnerable. Makes her protected, Kong Min corrected. Attacking her means war. Everyone needs to understand that. The Yakuza already understand, Roosevelt said. They've been testing boundaries for weeks. Your attachment became obvious despite your attempts at discretion. Betty felt Kong Min tense beside her, but kept her own expression neutral. What kind of testing? Roosevelt's eyebrow rose. Direct, isn't she? She's my wife. She has the right to ask questions. Kong Min's tone brooked no argument. Answer her. Surveillance primarily, Roosevelt said, switching to Korean, probably testing if she'd understand. Vehicles following her from work. Photos taken outside her apartment. One attempted approach in a coffee shop, intercepted by our people. Betty's stomach clenched, but she kept her voice steady, responding in Korean. When was the coffee shop incident? 2 weeks ago. She looked at Kong Min, whose jaw was tight. You said 3 weeks. You said I was never in danger. You weren't. We had 5 people on you. The approach was stopped before contact. But there was an attempt. She turned back to Roosevelt, still speaking Korean. What did they want? Confirmation you were his wife. Leverage assessment. Roosevelt looked almost impressed now. Your Korean is better than expected. My grandmother insisted. Betty folded her hands on the table, projecting calm she didn't feel. So the Yakuza know about me. What's their play? Uncertain, another council member said, Peter's father, Betty realized. They're expanding territory in Queens, challenging our businesses. A boss's wife is potential leverage, but also a declaration of war target. They're weighing options. We need to remove the uncertainty, Kong Min said. Make it clear Betty is untouchable. That any move against her brings full retaliation. By making her public, you've done that, Roosevelt said. But you've also made her an irresistible target. Every enemy now knows exactly how to hurt you. The words hung heavy. Betty felt the weight of every eye in the room, assessing whether she was weakness or strength, liability or asset. I have an idea, she said quietly. Kong Min turned to her. Betty, hear me out. She addressed the table, forcing herself to sound confident. They're watching me, testing boundaries. So let's give them something to watch. I have a gallery exhibition scheduled in 2 weeks, Korean contemporary artists, high profile. What if we use it as a trap? Silence. Then Roosevelt laughed, sharp and surprised. You want to bait the Yakuza with an art show? I want to bait them with me. Public event, controlled environment, everyone expecting me to be there. We can control variables, have security in place. If they're going to make a move, better on our terms than theirs. Absolutely not. Kong Min's voice was flat. You're not bait. I'm already bait. I became bait the moment we married. She turned to face him. This way we choose the time and place. We're prepared. It's smarter than waiting for them to choose. It's too dangerous. Everything is dangerous now. She kept her voice level despite her racing heart. At least this way, I'm not just waiting to be a victim. I'm participating in my own protection. Roosevelt was watching their exchange with interest. She has a point. Reactive defense is weaker than proactive offense. You're seriously considering this? Kong Min looked around the table in disbelief. I'm considering, Roosevelt said carefully, that your wife is smarter than you gave her credit for, and that a public trap, properly executed, could solve multiple problems. Draws the Yakuza out. Demonstrates our strength. Shows that threats against family have consequences. And puts Betty directly in harm's way. I'm already in harm's way, Betty repeated. This just gives us control. Kong Min's hands clenched on the armrests. She could see him warring between logic and instinct, between strategic advantage and protective fury. Finally, he turned to her, voice low and dangerous. If we do this, if you follow every security protocol, you don't deviate, you don't improvise, you trust the people protecting you. Understood? Understood. And if anything feels wrong, we abort. No heroics. No heroics, she agreed. He stared at her a long moment, then looked back at Roosevelt. Plan it. But Betty's safety is non-negotiable. I want 20 people minimum. Perimeter security, close protection, backup teams. The gallery gets swept daily for a week prior. Every guest gets vetted. Agreed, Roosevelt said. He was studying Betty with new respect. You might actually survive this family. That's the plan, Betty said, managing a smile despite her pounding heart. The next 2 weeks blurred into a strange new reality. Betty moved into the penthouse completely, her belongings mixing with Kong Min's until the space felt genuinely shared. Her books filled his shelves. Her coffee maker claimed counter space. Her art prints added color to minimalist walls. Security became her shadow. Peter or Jeremiah accompanied her everywhere. To the gallery, to coffee runs, to the grocery store. At first, it felt suffocating. By the second week, she barely noticed them. The gallery situation resolved itself unexpectedly. Margaret called 3 days after the incident, her tone carefully professional. Betty, we'd like you to stay on as an independent consultant. It allows you more flexibility and maintains your connection to Zenith. Translation: You're too connected to dangerous people to be full-time staff, but we can't afford to lose you entirely. Betty accepted. It was more than she'd expected. The exhibition planning became elaborate theater. The gallery was swept for devices daily. Guest lists were cross-referenced against known Yakuza associates. Security protocols were disguised as standard high-profile event procedures. Kong Min was everywhere and nowhere, managing details obsessively while trying not to smother her. She caught him watching her constantly, that intense focus that made her feel seen and possessed simultaneously. "You need to sleep," she told him one night, finding him at his laptop at 2 a.m., reviewing security footage. "I need to keep you safe. You've hired 20 people to keep me safe. Come to bed." He let her pull him away from the screen, into the bedroom, into her arms. They made love slowly, desperately, his hands mapping her body like he was memorizing every inch. "If anything happens to you," he started afterward, his face buried in her neck. "Nothing will happen." She stroked his hair, feeling the tension in his shoulders. "We have a plan. We're prepared. Plans fail. Then we improvise." She tilted his face up to meet his eyes. "I'm not fragile, Kong Min. I'm not going to break. You're everything," he said simply. "If I lose you, I lose everything." The weight of being someone's everything was terrifying and precious. Betty kissed him instead of answering, pulling him closer, trying to anchor them both. The night of the exhibition arrived cold and clear. Betty dressed carefully. A deep red dress that said confidence, said power, said "I'm not afraid." Diamond earrings Kong Min's mother had sent over that morning with a note in Korean. "For my daughter. Wear them proudly." Kong Min wore all black, severe and beautiful, his tattoo visible above his collar. A statement. A warning. "Ready?" he asked, adjusting her necklace with gentle fingers. "Ready." The Mercedes motorcade to the gallery was excessive. 3 vehicles, 8 security personnel. Peter rode in front, weapon visible under his jacket. Jeremiah coordinated from the second car. The gallery was already filling when they arrived. Betty scanned faces, looking for threats, for anything out of place. Everything looked normal. Perfect even. Too perfect. Kong Min's hand found hers, squeezed once. His security team dispersed strategically, becoming part of the background while watching everything. The first hour passed smoothly. Collectors examined art, champagne flowed, conversations hummed at appropriate volumes. Betty played her role. Knowledgeable curator, gracious hostess, Kong Min's wife standing visibly at his side. Then she saw her. A woman in her 30s, elegant in a black cocktail dress, Japanese features, moving through the crowd with predatory grace. 2 men flanked her at a distance, close enough to respond, far enough to appear casual. Betty's pulse spiked. She leaned toward Kong Min, voice low. 10 o'clock. Woman in black. "Is that Judy Nakamura?" His voice was flat, deadly. "Yakuza lieutenant. She shouldn't be here." She got through security. The guest list was vetted. She wasn't on it. His hand tightened on her waist. "Peter." Peter materialized instantly. Kong Min spoke in rapid Korean, and Peter nodded, disappearing into the crowd. More security personnel shifted position, tightening the perimeter around Betty. Judy was moving toward them now, wine glass in hand, smile pleasant. She stopped 10 feet away, the 2 men closing ranks behind her. "Kong Min," she said, her English accented but clear. "What a beautiful exhibition. Your wife has excellent taste. This is a private event. You're not welcome. The gallery is public tonight. Open to art enthusiasts." Her eyes slid to Betty, assessing. "You must be the famous Mrs. Kong. I've heard so much about you." Betty's mouth was dry, but she kept her voice steady. "I wasn't aware my reputation extended to the Nakamura family." Surprise flickered across Judy's face. Betty, knowing who she was, speaking directly rather than hiding behind Kong Min. "Your reputation extends quite far, Mrs. Kong. A curator who married into the Kong family. Fascinating choice. I married a man I love. His family came with the package." Betty felt Kong Min's tension like a live wire beside her. "But I don't believe you're here to discuss my marriage." "No." Judy sipped her wine. "I'm here to appreciate art. And to deliver a message." "Then deliver it and leave," Kong Min said, his voice carrying an edge that made nearby conversations falter. "The message is simple. Territory is changing in Queens. Business arrangements need renegotiation. Your family has been resistant to discussions." Her smile turned sharp. I thought perhaps a more personal approach might open dialogue. If you think threatening my wife opens anything but war, I'm not threatening anyone. I'm simply admiring art at a public event, alongside your lovely wife, who was so kind to curate this exhibition. Judy's eyes locked on Betty. Beautiful pieces. That park piece especially, the one about violence and consequences. Powerful work. The words were layered with meaning. Betty felt ice slide down her spine. You've made your point, Kong Min said. Now leave. Of course. Judy set down her wine glass carefully. Enjoy your evening, Mrs. Kong. I hope to see more of your work. Very soon. She turned smoothly, her guards flanking her as she moved toward the exit. Peter and Jeremiah shadowed them out. The moment the door closed behind her, Kong Min pulled Betty toward the back office. We're leaving. Now. The exhibition is over. That was a threat, Betty. Direct and clear. I know what it was. Her hands were shaking now, adrenaline crashing through her. She got through security. How? Fake credentials. Stolen invitation. Kong Min was already on his phone, barking orders in Korean. Someone inside helped her. We'll find out who. The office door burst open. Peter entered, weapon drawn, eyes scanning. Boss, we have a problem. 2 vehicles outside, blocking the street. 4 men in each. Yakuza. Confirmed. Kong Min's face went cold, expressionless in a way that was more terrifying than anger. How many of ours? 12 inside, 6 outside. They're outnumbered but positioned. Call Roosevelt. Full response team. Now. He turned to Betty, gripping her shoulders. Listen to me carefully. You stay with Peter and Jeremiah. You do exactly what they say. You don't hesitate, you don't question. Understood. What are you going to do? End this. He kissed her hard, fast. I love you. Remember that. Kong Min. But he was already moving, Peter following, leaving Jeremiah positioned at the door. Betty's heart hammered against her ribs. Through the office window, she could see gallery guests starting to sense something wrong, conversations dying, people moving toward exits. Jeremiah's radio crackled. Hostile movement. South entrance. Then gunfire. 3 shots, sharp and unmistakable. Screaming erupted in the gallery. Jeremiah grabbed Betty, pulling her away from the window, positioning himself between her and the door. Stay down, he ordered, weapon drawn. More shots. Shouting in Japanese and Korean. Betty pressed against the wall, her mind racing. This was real. Actually happening. People could die. Kong Min could die, because she'd suggested using herself as bait. The door exploded inward. Not kicked, blown, the lock shattered. One of Judy's men entered, gun raised. Jeremiah fired twice. The man went down. Another appeared in the doorway. Jeremiah moved to fire, but Betty saw the second man behind him, weapon aimed at Jeremiah's back. Behind you, she screamed. Jeremiah spun, but not fast enough. The shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. Betty grabbed the heavy glass sculpture from the desk, a piece by one of her artists, solid and weighted, and threw it with all her strength. It hit the second man in the face. He stumbled backward, blood streaming. Jeremiah fired from the ground, and the man dropped. Go, Jeremiah gasped, clutching his shoulder. Back exit. Now. Betty hesitated only a second, then ran. Through the back hallway, past storage rooms, toward the emergency exit she'd walked 100 times. Behind her, more gunfire. More shouting. The building's alarm shrieking. She burst through the exit into the alley. Cold air hit her lungs. A black Mercedes was already there. Peter at the wheel, passenger door open. Get in. Betty dove into the car. Peter peeled out before she'd even closed the door, tires screaming against asphalt. Through the rear window, she saw figures emerging from the building. Couldn't tell who was friend or enemy. Kong Min. Her voice cracked. Alive. Fighting. Roosevelt's team is 2 minutes out. Peter's voice was steady despite the chaos. Boss wanted you clear before he engaged fully. People are dying because of me. People are dying because the Yakuza declared war. Peter took a corner hard, and Betty braced against the door. This was coming regardless. You just gave us the time and place. Her phone buzzed. Kong Min's name flashing. She answered with shaking hands. Betty. His voice was rough, strained. You're clear. I'm with Peter. Are you hurt? Nothing serious. Gunfire crackled in the background. Stay with Peter. He's taking you to my mother's house in Fort Lee. You'll be safe there. What about you? I'm finishing this. His voice turned deadly soft. They came into your gallery. Threatened you in front of me. Shot my people. They don't get to walk away from that. Don't do something you can't take back. I'm doing exactly what needs to be done. This ends tonight, Betty. One way or another. More shouting, a burst of gunfire. I have to go. I love you. The line went dead. Peter drove like a man possessed, weaving through Manhattan traffic onto the George Washington Bridge. Betty's mind replayed everything. Judy's smile, the gunfire, Jeremiah bleeding, throwing that sculpture running. Her red dress was torn at the hem, her heels lost somewhere in the chaos. Jeremiah, she said suddenly. He was shot. Did he? Alive. Ambulance on scene. Peter's jaw was tight. He'll be fine. Tough bastard. They arrived at a modest house in Fort Lee 40 minutes later. Lights blazed inside. The door opened before they reached it. A small Korean woman in her 60s, elegant in casual clothes, face creased with worry. Peter said respectfully, "Mother, I've brought Salmonim." Catherine Kang's eyes swept over Betty, torn dress, bare feet, visible trembling. She said something sharp in Korean to Peter, then pulled Betty inside, arms surprisingly strong around her. Come, come. You're safe now." Her English was heavily accented. "My foolish son. Always violence. Always danger." She guided Betty to a couch, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "But you're safe. I protect you now." A younger woman appeared. Linda, Kong Min's sister, barely 20. Uni, older sister. She dropped beside Betty, taking her hands. "Are you hurt? Did anyone hurt you?" "I'm okay. I'm not hurt." Betty's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "But Kong Min is handling business." Catherine pressed a cup of tea into her hands. "Drink. Breathe. He will come home. He always comes home." Betty drank mechanically, the tea burning her throat. Catherine sat beside her, one arm around her shoulders, murmuring in Korean. Half prayer, half comfort. Linda held her hand, young face fierce with determination. An hour passed. Then 2. No calls, no updates. Just waiting. Finally, at nearly 2 a.m., headlights swept through the window. Catherine was at the door instantly. Kong Min entered, and Betty's heart lurched. He was covered in blood. His shirt torn, face cut, knuckles split. But alive. Moving. His eyes found hers immediately across the room. "Betty." She was off the couch and across the room before conscious thought, throwing herself into his arms despite the blood, despite everything. He caught her, held her so tight she couldn't breathe. "You're alive," she sobbed against his chest. "You're alive." "Always," he said roughly. "I'll always come back to you." Catherine ushered them into the bathroom, efficient and maternal despite the blood. She cleaned Kong Min's cuts with practiced hands while Linda hovered anxiously. Betty sat on the edge of the tub, unable to look away from him. "It's over," he said quietly, wincing as his mother dabbed antiseptic on the cut above his eye. "Judy and her team. Dealt with. Dealt with." Betty's voice was hollow. "Dead." He met her eyes steadily. "All of them. The Yakuza leadership is calling for negotiations. They want peace." Betty should have felt something. Horror, disgust, fear. Instead, she felt only exhausted relief. "And our people?" "Jeremiah's in surgery but stable. 2 others injured, non-critical. No casualties on our side." His jaw tightened. 6 civilians injured in the panic. "None seriously, but that's on me. I suggested the trap. That's on the Yakuza for starting a war." He caught her hand despite his mother's tutang. "You didn't pull triggers, Betty. They did." Catherine said something sharp in Korean. Kong Min responded, and they argued briefly before she threw up her hands and left, Linda trailing behind with a final worried glance at Betty. Alone, the bathroom suddenly felt too small. "You killed people tonight," Betty said. "Not a question." "Yes." No hesitation, no softening. "I told you what I am. This is that reality." "I know." She moved closer, taking the antiseptic and bandages from where his mother had left them. "Let me." He sat still as she finished cleaning his wounds, cataloging the damage. Split knuckles, bruised ribs visible through his torn shirt, that cut above his eye. Evidence of violence, of the man he was when protecting what was his. "Are you afraid of me now?" he asked quietly. Betty considered the question seriously. She'd seen him shoot a man tonight. Not directly, but she'd heard it, knew what he'd done. He'd killed multiple people, ended lives without hesitation. "No," she said finally, applying a bandage to his eyebrow. I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid of losing you. There's a difference. You might still lose me. This life doesn't come with guarantees. No life does. She set aside the medical supplies, settling between his knees. But I'd rather have uncertain years with you than safe decades with someone else. His arms came around her, pulling her close. They sat like that for a long moment, breathing together, letting the adrenaline slowly fade. 3 months, Kang Min said eventually. I want you to take 3 months away from anything dangerous. Let things settle. Let the peace with the Yakuza solidify. Stay home, stay safe. I'm not hiding for 3 months. Not hiding. Just being careful. His hand stroked her back. Please, Betty. For me. I need to know you're safe while I rebuild security protocols. She wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her. Okay, 3 months. But then we figure out how I live in your world without being locked away. Deal. 3 months later, Betty stood in the same penthouse, but everything had changed. The city spread below her in early March sunshine, winter finally releasing its grip. She pressed a hand to her stomach, still flat, but not for long. The pregnancy test had appeared positive a week ago. She hadn't told him yet, waiting for the right moment. Kang Min entered the penthouse, home early from a meeting. His face had healed completely, no visible scars from that night. But something had changed in him too, a heaviness, an awareness of mortality he hadn't carried before. You're home early, she said. Missed you. He kissed her, and she tasted coffee and something sweet. How was your day? Productive. Margaret wants me to curate a summer exhibition. I said yes. Good. You've been restless. He studied her face. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She took his hand, guided it to her stomach. Something's very right, actually. Confusion, then understanding, then shock rippled across his features. Betty, I'm pregnant. About 6 weeks. He froze completely, hand splayed across her stomach. Then in Korean. Really? Really? She covered his hand with hers. We're having a baby. The tears surprised her, sliding down his face unchecked as he dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead against her stomach. My baby. Mine. Ours, she corrected, stroking his hair. We're going to be parents. He looked up at her, face wet, expression raw with emotion. I don't know how to do this. Be a father. Keep both of you safe in this world. We'll figure it out. Together. She pulled him up into her arms. Like we've figured out everything else. I love you. He kissed her desperately. Both of you. So much it terrifies me. I love you too. Even when you're terrifying. They stood like that, wrapped in each other, until his phone buzzed. Work. Always work. But this time he ignored it, choosing her. Choosing them. 6 months after the gallery incident, they attended a new exhibition opening. Same gallery, different world. Betty moved through the crowd confidently, visibly pregnant now at 4 months, wedding ring prominent, Kang Min's hand possessive on her waist. She saw people whisper, recognized the mix of fascination and fear in their eyes. The mob boss's wife. The curator who'd survived a shootout. The woman who'd chosen danger over safety. A young collector approached, clearly interested in discussing a piece. He opened his mouth. Baby, I was thinking. Kang Min's hand tightened warningly on her waist. The collector's eyes went wide, registering his mistake, backing away with stammered apologies. Betty bit back a smile. You're impossible. I'm yours, he corrected. There's a difference. His hand moved to her stomach, protective and possessive. And you're mine. Both of you. Forever. Forever, she agreed, leaning into him. I wouldn't have it any other way. 2 years later, Betty stood in her own gallery. A gift from Kang Min, though she'd insisted on earning every piece through her own curation. Their daughter, Minseo, was asleep in her father's arms as he stood guard near the entrance, watching his wife work the room with the same possessive intensity as always. A young male artist approached Betty to discuss his work. Before he could speak, Kang Min materialized beside her, baby still sleeping peacefully against his chest. Can I help you? His tone was polite. His eyes were not. The artist wisely redirected his question through Betty in the most professional manner possible. Later, in the car ride home, Betty laughed. You scared that poor boy half to death. He was standing too close. Kang Min adjusted their sleeping daughter carefully. Minseo needs to learn early. Her mother is mine. Our daughter is 2 weeks old. I don't think she's taking notes on territorial behavior. Never too early to learn. He reached for Betty's hand, brought it to his lips. You're mine. She's mine. This life is mine. I don't apologize for protecting what's precious. Betty looked at her husband, dangerous, possessive, impossibly hers, and their perfect daughter sleeping peacefully despite her father's violent world. We're yours, she agreed softly. Always. And she meant it. Want more forbidden romances with possessive alphas who'll burn the world down for their women? Subscribe now and never miss a story. Drop a comment telling us, Team Possessive Boss or Team Secret Marriage. We read every single one.